Welcome to the Just Elite podcast. My name is Christelle, and with me today is Tim Paulson. Tim, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for making the time, especially so close to the games.
No, thank you very much for having me. I love doing this stuff. It's a ton of fun.
Tim, firstly, congratulations on punching your 5th consecutive ticket to the Crossfit Games. What an achievement. Before I get to anything else, I wanna start with, you mentioned on social media that you said this one was more special than any other ticket that you've ever punched. Why is that?
The main reason is we've got a son now. So I have an 8-month or almost 9-month-old boy. And honestly, I had questions kind of going into this year, especially with like COVID happening and lockdowns and that changing a lot of things. Especially as far as like stress levels go. And then the biggest one was honestly, if I could still do it with my new balance. I told my wife when we decided we were going to have a kid, I was like, I'm still going to try and qualify for the games as long as we're on the same page, but family will always come first. I'm not going to miss bedtimes. I'm not, training will definitely be a priority in my life, but, you and Wes are going to be like hands down priority number one, because in years past, it was a lot easier to be selfish. My wife was incredibly supportive of it, just because making it to the games requires a certain amount of selfishness. And I wanted to do it a little bit differently this year. So massive schedule changes. His daycare times largely affected my work and my training day because I don't just train. I run an affiliate as well. I run an online programming business. So basically, I had a lot of questions if I could still do it because, again, it was just I wasn't dedicating 100% of myself to training and recovery all the time. There was just more in my life, and yeah, I wasn't sure. So honestly, the fact that I did it and the fact that, how good I feel in training and competing, it was just such a just kind of incredible moment to be like, wow, with all of this balance and all of these new things in my life, I'm still able to improve my fitness feels incredible and able to do it while still kind of maintaining that promise to, my wife, my son, that they would be priority number one.
You said that the one word you describe the Granite Games was proud. Were you also surprised with what you mentioned about COVID and training and this change in your lifestyle? When you hit the floor for the first time in so many months, was there a little bit of a surprise of, okay, wow, this is actually, I'm okay, I'm fitter, I'm stronger, and, I did what I had to do?
Yeah. There was definitely, there was a lot of nerve, like probably more nerves than I've ever had competing just because like it had been so long, for the longest time now, like I've been doing CrossFit for 9 years. I've been competing since 2013. So almost 8 years now. And we've been competing so regularly that you just kind of get into a routine and, you have all these competition habits and you're learning things and there's like, you're just getting this constant exposure to competing. And that was gone. Like granted, I competed in my gym at the games, but like that's not obviously the same. And any athlete would tell you that. Like it's a very different feel. So it was like being back out on the floor. It's like, you're like all these things you kind of forgot a little bit, like just kind of come rushing back. After the first day, I would say the second event on day one, I paced it perfectly. I executed it really well. And I was really, really happy with like, just the tenacity that I had at the end of the workout. Like it's very easy when things start to hurt a lot. Like if you're not in the headspace of like, I'm doing this to win and I believe I can do it. It's really easy to just kind of dial back a little bit and be like, you know what, I'll step back a tad from the hurt locker. But like the last round of that workout, like I just dug in incredibly deep, found another gear and just, I was able to pass a couple guys on the last round and notch out a second place finish. And it was just like, I crossed the finish line and I was like, okay, you are definitely like, you're still here, like you've got the drive mentally. It's obviously still something I'm incredibly passionate about. Not that I question that, but it was like nice reaffirmation of like, I did it in person and it felt as good as I had hoped it would. End of day one definitely was a really big confidence booster. And I felt that way kind of throughout the rest of the weekend, honestly.
Tell us about the rest of the weekend. Obviously, we'll get to the final day, which was a phenomenal finish for you, and to get that podium finish for yourself. But tell us about the second day, and then fighting on that last day and just leaving it all on the floor.
Yes, I mean, the second day was tough. The morning workout was an interval workout that I was actually super excited about. We do a lot of interval training. It's actually my favorite, like, kind of type of workout to do. I just love the work, rest, like go really hard and then rest as hard as you can. It's just a format that I love. So I was really excited for the workout. There was a new implement. We had to push a type of sled that we've never pushed before. So that was like, very
Which looks
different. I was kind of
easy.
like
Which
nervous,
looks
but
easy, but it's not.
no, yeah. So it's like, and it had a little bit of a games feel, because at the games you always get new elements. You get new implements, things like that. So it had that kind of unique little twist to it that I was really excited about. And honestly, it happens when you compete. But I got a super costly no rep in my second interval. So for anyone that doesn't know, the workout had a buy-in of muscle ups, hang squat cleans, and burpees over the bar that you had to complete each interval. And then once you were done, you worked on pushing a sled. And on my last muscle up, I got no repped for a lockout, and he didn't no rep me until I had come down from the rings and was advancing to my barbell to do hang squat cleans. So it wasn't like I was still, in the movement. And it's like, oh, I'm at the top. I got no reps. I'll just do another one, so that cost me a couple seconds. And then frankly, a little bit of bad luck and a little bit of my own lack of athleticism cost me a couple more, because I went to jump back up on the rings and the wind had picked up and the rings were swinging. So I jumped up and I missed. I jumped up and I missed a second time, and I finally got him on the third try. So it was like, I just lost about 20 seconds of work time, and the intervals are only 2 minutes long, so it's just an amount of time that you frankly can't make up in that format. If it was a longer workout, no big deal, but so that was a bummer, because, I felt like I'm take a lot of pride in my movement and my movement quality. Frankly, in my competition career, I've had very, very few no reps. Like I can recall probably on one hand the number of times I've been no reps for just like in a routine movement. So I was pretty, in the moment, I handled it as best as I could. Afterwards, I was pretty upset and pretty fired up about it, because again, it cost me, I think that was my worst finish of the weekend. I was like 18th or something like that. And just, an event that should have been, frankly, probably a top 10, maybe not an incredible finish, but like a very solid finish. And those points are costly, because these semifinal weekends are very, there's not a lot of room for error. Like guys are really fit, guys and girls, obviously, people are really fit, they're really talented, and there's not a lot of events. So you just can't afford to drop points. So that was like a real bummer. But I've had some pretty bad competition experiences that have forced me to kind of grow mentally and learn how to deal with setbacks and frustrations. So I knew how to handle it. Once the event was over, I took my time, got my emotions out, and then it was like, all right, black it out, next one. And then I did really well in the Saturday night event. It was a little bit of a wheelhouse workout for me, definitely something I would consider strengths. It was like ski erg, handstand walks, and handstand push-ups, which I love all three of those movements. So I was able to notch a top 5, and that put me into a qualifying spot going into Sunday. But I was in 5th by like 4 or like 8 points, like just not an amount of points that made me comfortable in the slightest, like just too close, way too close for my liking. So that kind of led into Sunday, and I'd found myself in this position before back at regionals in 2018. I caught a bad break on day 1, was outside of a qualifying spot, and Saturday morning I came into the building ready to set the place on fire. Just like when things don't go your way, you got 2 options. You can fold, or you can get angry and perform. And frankly, that was what I did on Sunday morning. We had back-to-back workouts on a running clock, and I was able to, honestly, it was one of the best memories for me competing, because just you get these moments of like what I'll call like perfect flow, where just like your pacing feels incredible. Like the workout just feels like it's just happening, like it doesn't feel like it's happening to you. Like you're happening to the workout, and you're like, I am just on cloud 9. Everything feels good, feels dialed in. And I was able to notch a 3rd place finish and then a 1st place finish in back-to-back workouts that were 100 point each. And that vaulted me up into 2nd place at the time and put me, I want to say it was like 60 or 70 points clear of the cut line going into the final event. And I told my coach on Sunday morning, I was like, hey man, like I'm pretending the workout that the weekend ends Sunday morning, because for all intents and purposes, it's 200 points up for grabs. There's only 100 points left afterwards. Like if I can outperform here, the weekend's over. Like the last event is really just kind of just a formality. Whereas if I don't perform on Sunday morning, like you don't want to leave it all to the last event. That's not a fun place to be in. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a weekend of lots of ups and downs and a lot of bounce backs. But I mean, I think that's one of the other reasons I'm so proud of it, because it didn't go smoothly. It wasn't a perfect weekend. I had a misjudgment on the snatch. I had that costly no rep, like just little mistakes that some are in my control, some were out of my control. And I was just really proud of how I handled them all and kind of how I managed the emotional roller coaster of the weekend to get my ticket.
And then that beautiful photo that you posted of yourself on the podium with your son, that must have been a proud moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, it's just one of those things that I'll remember forever. It's like you never any athlete that's been to the games, whether once or 10 times, like they'll tell you that you never take any trip for granted. Like it's because of the nature of the sport, how competitive it is, how slim the margins are. Like you never know if you're going back again. Like you can work as hard as you want, and sometimes it's not enough. And that's it. So like, I've always tried not to take for granted the fact, like each year I qualify, it's like, it's better than the last, like it just, I never take for granted that I'm going to go back there. And that was like, that weekend was definitely, that was just kind of the feeling I had on the podium. Like, I put in a lot. This is, it's 9 years in the making. It's 9 years of training. And it was, this last year was really difficult for a lot of people, myself included. And I was just, was just crazy proud. And like, just to have that, to have that shared moment with, with my son is just, I mean, it's just crazy. It's one of those things that you'll look back on in like 10, 15 years, and it'll just be like, just a cool story to tell them. Like, hey, you don't remember this at all, but I do.
Yeah. I want to go back a few notches back. You spoke about the games last year, that the first stage of the games that you guys had to perform on your own in an affiliate. Does that make this year even more special now that you say obviously you didn't take it for granted, but missing that and not being able to go through and be one of the 5 or one of the top 10 athletes that actually made it to the ranch?
Oh, 100%. And like I've talked to a couple buddies of mine, that have been to the games a couple times as well. And like everybody felt, I mean, unfulfilled might be the wrong word, but it's not the same. Everybody obviously wanted to go to the ranch. Like that was on everybody's mind. That was everyone's goal. Like everybody wanted to make it out there. And yeah, it didn't feel the same. Like there's something really, really special about being on the floor at the games. Like the environment, the fans, the like just like knowing that this is like the absolute pinnacle tip of the spear, and like like these are the best athletes in the world. Like these are the best athletes in what we do. Like that experience and being on the floor with everybody and like stacking up, like that's what it's all about. And you definitely, I'll speak for everybody, you didn't get that vibe in your gym, because again, it's like you're working out by yourself, you don't know how other people are doing, you're kind of just waiting for the leaderboard to update and roll in. And especially with the fact that some guys did get to go compete in person, it was definitely, you're like, you just feel like you missed out. Like even if you had a good finish, like in any other year, if I came 14th at the games, I wouldn't be mad. Like I'd be like, you know what, that was probably like, that would be a performance that I would be proud of. And I am proud of what I did, don't get me wrong. But when only 5 guys advance, it definitely just doesn't feel the same. So it's definitely, I don't know how many more years I've got left, how many more years I'm going to do this. I'm safe to say it's at least another 1 or 2. But to make sure that, again, not taking anything for granted, that if I were not to make it back to the CrossFit Games ever again, obviously that's not the plan. But if that were the case, the fact that my last year would be on the floor in the real CrossFit Games would definitely, it means a lot. I don't. And again, it's not going to be my last time. I fully intend on going back at least once or twice more. But it's definitely it's special, and it definitely means a lot to get back out there and kind of after what the whole world has been through, to kind of get back to a little bit of normalcy.
But I mean, Tim, you did really, really well at the 2020 games. It was your best finish thus far, even though it was within the four walls of your own gym. So that must give you a little bit of a confidence boost, knowing that even though the setup was different, your training was different, obviously you became a father, so many things changed, you are still getting better and stronger each and every year, regardless of what the world is going through and what you are going through personally.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And like, that's, we look back at that weekend and it's like, hey, we're going in there. Like, I'm fitter than ever. Like I was 20, was I 29 or was I 30? God, how old am I? I'm 31 now.
Yes.
I was 30 last, I was 30 last year at the games. And it's like, hey, I've been doing this since I was 22, 23. And like, I'm getting fitter every year still, and like the fact that this year, I still feel better than ever. It's like, what we're doing is working. So like, I definitely didn't take that for granted. The fact that it was my best finish ever. And even if it was in a format that historically I do well in online competition. I always do, the Open's a pretty strong stage for me. So I'm comfortable in that environment, partially because I've always been a bit of a loner. Just like, that the being by myself and pushing by myself doesn't bother me at all. So I was comfortable in that format, but I'm hopefully gonna better it this year. So that's the goal that we're going into the season with anyway.
Well, with your performance thus far, I think it's pretty sure that to say that we will see you move up on the leaderboard. So tell us about let's first start with this. Your business, you're a business owner, an affiliate owner. Are you affiliated? Because it's called Palace Fitness, but you don't mention CrossFit. Yeah. So it's not affiliated.
We are affiliated. So actually, we our affiliates CrossFit Palace. We opened back in 2012. We were CrossFit Palace until 2019. We actually opened a second studio within our gym. And we were basically trying to branch out a little bit to try and reach a little bit more of the, kind of CrossFit in between market, like people that kind of want to do functional fitness, they want to do classes, but they don't, they aren't quite ready for a barbell or, kind of like to hit that little middle ground a little bit. And so we opened a second studio called Palace Fitness. So basically we were running CrossFit Palace and Palace Fitness in side-by-side studios. That was in late 2019. We were open for about 6 months. COVID happened. So that wasn't a great time to have just opened up a second facility. And then obviously kind of everything happened with headquarters, and there was, the Greg Glassman incidents and all those things. And basically, we had it was our firm belief that while CrossFit is at the core of what we do, like as a business, as from our programming, from, a lot of the methodology, things like that, that we had developed our own unique twist on it over the last 9 years. Like I've been programming for 9 years now, and, we do CrossFit, but it's my own unique blend of it. It's a mix of prehab, and we don't do certain movements that I don't necessarily love for the general population often. We do everything still, but so, we had kind of just taken our own spin on it. And I think for me, the biggest thing is that CrossFit is a draw for a lot of people, but it's also, for some people it's scary. So basically, kind of in our head, when we kind of shut down our other studio, because it was, again, 6 months open, COVID shut it down. We didn't have a strong membership. So we're like, all right, all this is happening. We're going to rebrand the entire business as Palace Fitness. And we're still going to operate, we're still going to keep our CrossFit affiliation. We're still going to, we still call things CrossFit, but we just wanted to be able to, at least from a branding perspective and like on the surface, be able to attract that audience that might be a little hesitant about CrossFit. Because, we firmly believe that once someone comes into our gym, they're going to meet our coaches, they're going to see what we do, they're going to experience a class, they're going to love it, and it's going to be for them. Like whatever you want to call it, you can call it CrossFit, you can call it fitness, you can call it XYZ. Like what we do is for everybody, and we know that, and we just wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves the best opportunity to get those people that might be on the fence in the door, because once they're in the door, we know we've got them. We know we have a great service and a great product, and they would stay. So that was kind of why we ventured from CrossFit Palace over to Palace Fitness over the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, CrossFit, the name, even when it started, it was scary and people had this idea of it, but I think it's gotten even more scary as elite athletes like yourself just get fitter and stronger, and the things that you see at the games and what Dave, programs and thinks, dreams of when he sleeps and, puts it in the games, it becomes a bit scary. So if you're not prone to exercise and you're starting out, it's actually a very, very smart way to look at it. But as an elite athlete, having such a big business, because you've got quite the staff team and coaches team at Palace Fitness. There's quite a few people that work for you, balancing that and training and your family. I know you speak about balancing this year, especially with your son. How do you even manage that? Because there's obviously a certain amount of training that you guys have to do. And that's not even talking about the recovery time, which obviously is the most important. How do you balance that with your business? That also going through what we went through as a world, as the world in 2020, and opening a business, closing a business.
Yeah, it was. I mean, last year was special, for sure. And luckily, I mean, first and foremost, we have an incredible team. We are very lucky to have attracted some really phenomenal people who are also phenomenal coaches. And I mean, they're at the core of what we do. And for me, so this past year was bananas. Luckily, when COVID kind of started happening, once it got serious, after the initial, we're just going to be closed for 2 weeks, like after that had faded and everyone was like, oh, we're going to be closed for way more than 2 weeks. Once that all kind of rolled around, I was lucky to have a nice setup in my basement. So I was able to train from home. And at that point, we hadn't had Wes yet. So we had Wes kind of at, I guess, the tail end of the pandemic. Our son, we had him in October of 2020. So throughout most of the pandemic, my wife works in a hospital, so she was absurdly busy. And, frankly, I would train in my basement when it was convenient, and I was just on my computer, on the phone, on Zoom, basically all day. It was just, I was lucky that we didn't have anything else going on, so I could dedicate a lot of time to trying to pivot, just like anyone else was, trying to figure out how can we still provide value? How can we still offer services in a very modified way to our members? How can we best serve them? So, I had like everyone, I had a lot of free time on my hands, especially because we didn't have a baby at that point. So, I was able to put that to good use and kind of, work with the team and figure out how we could best get through the pandemic. But, kind of fast forward to how the whole balancing act works. I mean, like I said, I just consider myself incredibly lucky that we have a wonderful team. Between my business partner, we've got 3 or 4 coaches that are, full-time at the gym. And they're great people and they're great humans. They're great coaches, they're great faces for the community. And frankly, where I am as a business owner now versus where I was 3 years ago is vastly different. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I was still coaching 20 to 24 hours a week. I was still trying to train 20 hours a week. I was doing back end stuff for the business, another 10 or 12. There was just 60 to 70 hours of things that needed to get done every week. Whereas, over the last couple of years, again, we've attracted some coaches that are, now doing this as a full-time gig. So they have, all of their time is able to be, invested in the gym. And, we've started to pass off some responsibilities and just kind of start to share the burden, share the burden, a level of, a burden of love, but, share the burden of keeping a gym running, and all the things that go into that, whether from a, kind of basic operations standpoint or, coaching, programming, space management, all those things. Like I said, we're just really lucky to have such an awesome team. And, without them, I would have drowned a long time ago. I mean, there's no way around it. I would have drowned in work and something would have had to give, many moons ago. So I wouldn't be able to do what I do without knowing that the gym is in such good hands, because I'm not there as much anymore, between my son's daycare hours and just kind of, again, doing the back end stuff for the business and training. I'm definitely not in the business as much as I used to be. So, just had to rely on those people. And luckily, I think they're all stellar humans and I can rely on them a lot.
Are you the only competitive CrossFit athlete at your box?
So we have this year. So I mean, at a games level, yes. This year with the quarterfinals, we had 6 or 7 people compete in the quarterfinal stage. So in the top 10% worldwide, and then we had 2 of our coaches actually competed in the Masters online qualifier, and one of them finished, I want to say she was around 50 or 60th in the 35 to 39 category, so the young category. the youngest masters category anyway. So I mean, we definitely have some very, very fit people at our gym. But you know, from a top level competitive standpoint, I'm the only one at the gym.
But you say you enjoy, you're a bit of a loner and you enjoy training on your own. And most of your videos that you post of yourself is you very alone. I mean, I don't even spot a ghost in the corner, to be honest. It's really
Yeah.
just you grinding away. And yeah, do you sometimes like grab somebody from another box or one of your competitors from the games, like say, let's just, train together, or do you stick it out the whole year and only when you hit the competition floor you can see, okay, cool, what I'm doing is working?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so my coach is down in New York City, which is about 4 or 5 hours from where I am. And we have a couple other athletes on my program that are like semifinal games caliber athletes. So I'll get together with them a couple times a year, like maybe 2 or 3 times we'll get together. My coach will come up this way a couple times. Um, so I definitely get with other people, and like it's not for, I would say, like, it's not that I wouldn't want to do it more. It's just that because of, especially now with like the nature of my life and balance and things like that, it's just harder. Like harder to either get away or have someone come here. It's just kind of tough. But like I said, I'm also, I've always been kind of a loner. Like, I mean, always, like, especially since college, like, I backpacked in Ireland and Scotland by myself for a couple weeks. Like, I've always been very comfortable by myself. It's just a personality trait I've always had. So, especially when it comes to training, I'm not going to lie. I mean, there are times where it gets lonely, like, I mean, any human being occasionally is like, wow, that really sucked, and I'm very alone. But there's definitely, I mean,
Yeah.
I just think all of it's mental training exercise. Like at the end of the day, like I wouldn't do this if I didn't love to push myself mentally, because I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what makes or breaks a top level CrossFit athlete, in my opinion. It's not your raw physical capacity. I mean, obviously that has a lot to do with it, but a lot of it is like, how hard you push and how well you push and how well you know your body and just kind of how you approach things. So if I didn't have, I have a very deep appreciation for that. And the fact that that happens by myself is, sometimes better, because again, it's, some people are very different. Some people only push, or not only push well, but they just push better with other people around. Whereas I have no problem just burying myself in the dirt. Like it's, I, if when I need to do it, I'm like, all right, let's see if I can make myself pass out today. It's just kind of it's a weird, bad, I don't know, maybe bad personality trait to have, but it works for CrossFit
I don't
anyway.
think it's bad. It's a CrossFit mindset, and I think there's a lot of CrossFitters, and I include myself. That's not necessarily on a elite level or professional games level, that we kind of addicted to that suck. You pushed at that point where you want to faint, or you might vomit or cry. or hopefully pass out before you get to any of those. For your mental strength training, obviously you train on your own, and you said you're quite comfortable there, but other mental training, mental toughness training that you do you meditate, do you listen to podcasts, do you read, do you go for sessions with like a psychologist trainer or whatever?
Yes, I mean, a lot of it. So I definitely do. I'm a big fan of meditation. Like just kind of like, but it's, I guess, meditation or mindfulness, like whatever you want to call it, like just kind of, relax, like, relaxing breathing and just kind of like being incredibly present. It's just something that I find very like relaxing, and it applies a lot to CrossFit because, especially when you're competing, like if you can be fully and 100% present in the moment and feel connected to your body, like that's, that, like if you have like a really deep connection and understanding of your body, exactly how you're doing at any given moment. Like, when you can push, when you need to dial back, because at the end of the day, CrossFit is an individual sport where even though we're competing against other people, it's just a self-performance test. Like, yeah, like you might see another guy and try and chase him down, like that definitely happens, but at the end of the day, you can only push as hard as your body and your mind are trained to push. So that piece of it, I'm definitely like a huge fan of. And the other thing is, I mean, so for me, I've always been a big philosophy guy. I have a degree in accounting and I have a master's in accounting as well, but I spent all of my my extra university credits basically like studying philosophy classes, architecture, weird things that I have passions for. And I've just always been a huge fan of Stoic philosophy. So I read a lot of that. I have a Stoic book that I read every day. I have a couple, famous Stoic philosophers. I have their like dissertations and their collections at my house. I just find it a very appropriate way of thinking, especially for life as a whole, in my opinion, but also especially for CrossFit, because, at the end of the day, Stoic philosophy boils down to controlling controllables and being very present and very disciplined. And that's, what it all comes down to. I would definitely say those are the two biggest things that I've done. And, I don't think like Stoic philosophy is so simple, like, like at its face value, it is so brutally simple, but applying it to everything that you do like all day long, day after day, like that's where the discipline comes in. And that's where I think it applies most to CrossFit as well, because, being a top level athlete, like it's all about the little things, and it's all about the little things day after day. Like it's not, there's no grand sweeping gestures. It's just about, are you doing the right things for recovery every day? Are you doing the right things for training? Are you taking care of yourself? And it's being able to do that all 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, nonstop. I mean, that's what keeps you at the top, in my opinion.
And I mean, and recovering your body recovering your mind is just as important as recovering your body, because your mental strength and you get mental fatigue as well with this training, because there's so much thought that goes into this, and there's so much, you talk to yourself so much during a workout, and with bad days and good days, like, why am I not performing well? I know you also mentioned that on one of your recent posts, is I'm not feeling great. Why am I not feeling great? Why am I not getting better? Why am I feeling so sucky? What did I do wrong? So your mental recovery, what does that look like? How do you switch off? Because even just for an amateur CrossFitter, and I've been doing this for just as long as you have, but you think about the workout, you think about your performance. How do you switch off and go, okay, fine, this happened. I'll wait until I get to the box tomorrow and let's try again.
Yes, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to like accurate reflection. So like, for me, my wife she accused me sometimes of compartmentalizing too well. But it's definitely something, being able to compartmentalize kind of pieces of my life, especially now that, again, there's a lot more going on with having a kid, things like that. But a lot of it comes down to like, for me, like if a training session goes really well or really poorly, when it's over, I reflect on it, because like right away, that's when when you're emotionally your most raw, and like you have the truest, in my opinion, feelings of what happened, and you can give the most appropriate, like, like, was I just frustrated? Like, did I have an inappropriate game plan? Did I do something wrong from a recovery perspective? Did I not warm up the right way? Like, so right after the training's over is when it's time, in my opinion, to reflect and basically, take those little mini lessons, because again, it's not going to be about sweeping changes. It's going to be about small things, at least at a certain point. At a certain stage, it becomes just about making really minute changes and kind of taking those really small little, like, kind of micro victories. So for me, basically, reflection after a training session is super important. And if I reflect immediately, then that leaves me, frankly, kind of free for the rest of the day, because again, just like from a Stoic philosophy standpoint, or kind of however you want to approach it, like once it's done, it's done. And like once the activity is done, and once you've reflected adequately and you've taken any lessons you can take from it, that's it. Like there's nothing else to do. You can't do anything else about it. Like, so I'm not, if I have a bad day in the gym, I'm going to reflect and I'm going to be like, okay, how can I make tomorrow better? Like what did I do today that led to that poor training session, so that I can try and fix it? And once I have those things, it's behind me. Like it's, the session's over, the training's done. Like I still put in the work. It may not have been perfect, but I put in the work, and I've learned something mentally that I can use to kind of move forward from that. And I think having that kind of process really allows me to compartmentalize, so that, like, when training's done, I'm not beating myself up about training 24/7. It's like, no, training's done. Now it's time to enjoy time with my son. Now it's time to go spend some time outside. Now it's time to read a book. Like, like you can do those things that help you decompress and that help you kind of just not be in it 24/7, and actually enjoy them, like, because you're not still beating yourself up about training. You're not still beating yourself up about the missed lift or the poor performance or whatever it is. So I think in that sense, like, compartmentalizing can be super healthy. And, I think for a lot of things, whether it's like, if you go to work every day, you have a crappy day at work, it's like, all right, why was my day crappy? What can I do different? What can I do better? And then it's done, because the day's over. And like, again, I'm just not a fan of kind of like dwelling and lingering on things that just don't need to be they don't need to be present for longer than they are.
Mm.
So that's kind of, I guess, the biggest way that I kind of manage it is just trying to just trying to stay present, like taking what lessons I can from a moment. And then after that, going on and moving on to enjoy the next moment, which is really easy to do when when I pick my son up every day, it's like, we just kind of shoot the shit for an hour and a half or 2 hours till my wife gets home. And it's just like super fun. And, it's very easy to be present because he's a super smiley kid and he's really fun to be around. So it's definitely, that helps.
I mean, it sounds like you're pretty wise. All the philosophy obviously has helped, but this obviously didn't come from the start, from your beginning days of regionals. Or have you always had this mindset? Has it always been easy to make that switch?
Oh no, definitely not. And like there were definitely, like, I think in the early days of, one, I was younger, like when I started CrossFit, I was 22, 23. And like, granted, I had some really formative experiences in college. Between studying abroad and then again, going on a backpacking trip and just kind of like having a lot of time to myself, like, I had a lot of formative experiences. So I've definitely always considered myself an old soul. I always have been. But, I think it's hard to, especially when something's new, it's hard to apply that kind of like 10,000 foot view down. So like, especially when I was younger, so I was younger and dumber. That doesn't help. And just like, I was new to the sport. So I didn't appreciate and kind of understand the nuances. It was just like, oh, like, I just love this thing and I just want to do it. And I just want to strangle it with love. And, like, I was kind of in that initial phase throughout the first couple of years, especially at regionals and things like that. So I think it definitely developed over time, and frankly, it took a couple of really bad setbacks to basically teach me what I was made of. Like I DNF'd out of my first regional. I had a couple horrible finishes at my first couple of regionals in like 2015, 16. I had some really misfires at the games in 2018, like basically lost events I thought I was going to nearly win. So like there was a lot of setbacks along the way, and like they just kind of, I think when those happened, having a little bit of a base of like something that I found grounding, which was philosophy for me, like, kind of like stoic thinking, like that was kind of always my grounding. Like it was just something that made sense to me. Like it felt like something that made sense and I could use it as a way to make sense of the world. And through setbacks, I kind of realized that, hey, like this is, dealing with it in this way is a way that makes me feel comfortable and makes me like, feels like it allows me to grow. So that was kind of it. I didn't do it intentionally at first, I don't think. It just kind of like, I realized what I was doing after maybe a couple big failures, and it was like, oh, maybe I should spend some more time on this because it's working. And if I really hone the process in, then I can make it work better.
Mm.
And I think that was kind of how it started. Like it definitely wasn't like, I kind of had this mindset from the start by any way, shape, or form.
Tell us about, you mentioned now your 2018 games. Tell us about the 2019 games. Now, since 2018, nothing in this sport has been consistent. Everything has changed. The moment they took regionals away, for me, everything just went like this, like imploded, and it hasn't stopped changing. So for me, that's not an elite level. Even for me, it was very frustrating. But I can imagine for athletes like yourself, you plan your season, and this year is kind of like your old regional setup. It's just called something completely differently. But the 2019 games was something for me personally that was, it seemed like a good idea on paper, maybe not even. And in practice, it was just, you get people that travel from Lord knows where up in Africa that pays so to go to the games for one workout. I mean, granted, it was still their decision to go, but the concept for me, the idea of it just didn't make sense. You got cut in which event?
First event.
The first event.
Not great.
Not great.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because yes, you live in the States. This is not your first trip to the games. Tell us about what happened and that disappointment, because obviously it was not your first games, but you obviously did not expect to get cut after something that obviously you think, or a rope climb, it's snatches, it's a run. You do this in the gym every single day.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was definitely, I think, going back to like not taking anything for granted, like the 2019 games where it was like this massive change and you're like, well, is this the future? Like, like, are we going to be competing with 130 people every year and they're just going to slash the field in half over 2 work, like, so there was definitely a moment of like, well, one, I hope this isn't the future because I don't like this, but the personal opinions about that aside, yeah, the event itself was, it was definitely going to be a big like gut check for me because legless rope climbs are something I've historically struggled with. It's just, I'm a big guy. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm 200 some odd pounds. Like I'm a big dude. So we've had to work really hard on them over the years, and they've definitely held me back at times, but we've been pretty relentless in our pursuit of getting better at them. So I looked at it and was like, all right, well, here's your test, man. Like this, like literally event one, this is basically going to test everything you've done for the last 12 months. And if you pass, the rest of the weekend's probably looking really good for you because your fitness is where it needs to be. Like everything felt really good. So it was really just about kind of getting over that first like hurdle. And I think if you look at it from an elite like competitor perspective, or even from anybody at the, like anyone that was there at the games perspective, it was just a legless rope climb workout. The rest of the movements were relatively irrelevant.
And the weights
So
were
even
pretty light for you guys, for the elite, the weight wasn't a problem.
exactly. And and the rope climb, so and this is just I'll preface this by saying this is an unemotional retelling of what I thought going into the event. Like, all right, it's legless rope climbs. I thought we were told they were 15 feet. But when you got out there, the rig was definitely not 15 feet tall. And they put us on crash pads that were about 3 feet tall, or probably 2 feet tall. And they dropped because they were meant to be bouncy. So when you stand on it, you drop another like 12 to 18 inches as you sink into it. And you also couldn't jump because the crash pad was bouncy. So you couldn't jump into the rope climb really. You basically had to start from essentially like standing. So, in my like mind, I did my first rope climb and I was like, well, holy shit, that felt like 17 to 17 and a half feet because I actually have 17-foot ropes at my gym. Like, and I train on them often enough, but probably, obviously I didn't do enough 17-foot legless rope climbs. I did 15 feet, way too much. But so like within the event, when I did that first rope climb, there was an immediate moment of like, okay, you need to change your game plan to this workout completely. Because again, this is a movement that you were going to have to game plan intelligently anyway. And after doing the first one, it was very obvious to me that this was going to be a much more daunting movement than I had initially thought. So I was like, all right, we're taking a little bit of extra rest. It's no big deal. Like, it's just stay nice and steady. Again, we're going to manage this as best as I could. I got through 2 rounds and I was like, you know what? I actually feel pretty good. Like, I think I'm managing fatigue well. I'm in a decent place in the field, not towards the front, but I wouldn't expect to be in a workout that was very legless rope climb dominant. So I came back from the third run and I went to climb the rope. I got up once successfully and I was like, okay, I'm feeling a little tired. Like I probably need to take a little bit of extra rest. And on my second rope climb, I got a no rep. So I got to the top, got no rep. And as I came down, heard the judge call it. And I was like, well, shit. Definitely don't have any of those to spare. So that's not good. So, it was at that moment that I was like, all right, I am experienced enough to know that once rope climbs go away, they are gone. Like they're not coming back. They are 100% gone until the time cap comes. So like I was like, all right, whatever, no rep, it's all good. I took my chalk and I just walked down my lane. I was like, all right, just like walk it off, take 30 or 45 seconds, make sure that you don't miss this next one because you can't afford a second no rep. You can't afford to get failure. So I came back, I completed my second one successfully. And I was like, okay, just one more. And then we're back to the snatches. It'll be okay. And I frankly don't really remember exactly what happened, but I got no rep again. And it might have been a mix of I was getting too close to failure and skirting the line. Like I didn't make the touch obvious enough, or I may have just failed and missed. Frankly, at that point, I was a little like not as present as I would have otherwise liked to be. So I missed. And at that point, I was pretty well aware that I was in trouble. So I took my chalk, I walked down the lane. It was like, all right, like I think I took over a minute of like, I was like, all right, just like you can't afford failure. Like just, try and be smart, manage this as best as you can. I took over a minute to a minute and a half off. And then I went back to try it again, and I was at failure. I got like 3/4 of the way up, had nothing. And it was at that point, like, after that, when I got near the top, but just physically couldn't go, like that was when the world kind of just like came crashing in, because up to that point, I was happy with how I was managing what was going on. Like, again, it wasn't going well, but I was managing it as best as I could. I was taking intelligent rest. I was trying to, manage the fatigue as best as I could. I was trying to do the right things. But at that point, it was like, all right, you're officially, that was it. Like there's only 5 minutes or 4 minutes left in the workout, like, and you're at near failure. So like I rested, I want to say like a minute and a half. And I was like, all right, just get the damn rope climb done. But the damage had already been done. I had done, that was my fourth and a half rope climb of that round. And it was supposed to be a set of 3. So, I was climbing the rope for my 5th or 6th time, and it was just, it was gone. So, it was, and that was the moment where I was like, all right, I realized that I probably had missed the cut. I was like, there's no way that getting capped in the 3rd round of this workout is going to be enough. And yeah, I mean, just like the feeling of like, I've probably never been more disappointed in myself. Just because, again, it's like you come down, it's like, all right, there was obviously some execution errors, in a workout that was very high stakes, high stress, like just didn't, like there was a lot went wrong. It was definitely not it was going to be a hard workout for me regardless. And I didn't execute it as well as I needed to. And it cost me everything. It cost me the first cut at the games, and my, a horrible finish and a horrible mental place, so it was just, yeah, it was all things bad. And for, a couple days after that, everything was pretty bad. Like my wife and I hung out in Madison for, I want to say like 12 more hours, and we left first thing the next morning. We rented a car and we just drove back across the country, and we stopped along the way. We went to breweries. I got pretty drunk each night, and, it's just like, just like to try and, like I vented a lot. Like we were in the car for like 17 hours. Like I talked a lot. Just because trying to process, like trying to get all my emotions out, trying to get the frustration out, trying to figure out what I did wrong, what I did right, like just, just again, trying to like kind of what I alluded to earlier, just trying to get it out, like, like process and deal with all these feelings of like disappointment and like you let everybody down and just being pissed off, like just the whole realm of it, like just deal with it. And I did. And I mean, honestly, it took us three or 4 days to drive home. And by the time we got home, I was like, I was like, all right, like it's over. Like, that, again, like that was it. There's nothing else you can do now. It was obviously a horrible result. It wasn't at all what I wanted, but I mean, it definitely fueled my training for the next year exponentially, because, it's one of those things where you fail on the biggest stage possible, and you never want that to happen ever again. So it was just like, it was definitely the most disappointing thing of my competitive career for sure. But, it fueled me for the next 12 months. I was like, it gave me a vengeance for legless rope climbs. It gave me a vengeance for just proving to myself that I'm so much better than that. Like it really kind of, like I said, it just fueled the next 12 months of training. So the very long-winded story was that. But I'm a firm believer that from the biggest setbacks, they're also the biggest growth opportunities. And, I feel now like I feel fitter than I've ever been. I feel mentally stronger than I've ever been. It's like the little things like getting a no rep in an event are just laughable now. It's like, oh, that sucked. It's not getting cut from the games in the first event. So it definitely gives you a little perspective as far as like, just those other little setbacks that are bound to happen throughout your, throughout any journey. But yeah, it was something else.
I had this exact conversation with one of our South African athletes that was her very first trip to the games, was in 2019, and she got cut at the first event because she went up for the first rope climb, came down, and all her skin on her hands just went gone as she came down. It's not that she can't do legsless, but then she had no skin on her hands and obviously couldn't even finish the second rope climb in the first round.
Yeah.
And so she said that she had this absolute fear and trauma for a legless rope climb, and had to kind of work around it. And with Fittest in Cape Town this year, obviously you've been to Fittest in Cape Town, but with the semifinals this year, there was ropeless legless rope climbs in
Yeah.
events. And then she jumped up and failed the first one, and she's like, oh shit, okay, well fuck, here we go again. And then eventually,
Yeah.
she did pretty decently in a workout that she previously got cut from the games. Did you spend like a lot of time working on them, making sure that that doesn't happen again? Do you have a little bit of fear or trauma thinking that, okay, 2021, what if he programs legless rope climbs? Like, is that in the back of your mind? Are you comfortable with them now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel more comfortable with them than I ever have. Because we've literally done legless rope climbs probably twice a week, and on those days we also do a ton of strict pulling volume. We do, dead hanging, single arm hanging. I mean, like a variety of exercises. Single arm tempo rowing, like just more things than we have ever. Like, in the past we were doing those things. Like, we weren't being. It's not like we were being negligent. Um, we were doing them, but at this point we're like, all right, we obviously need to do them more. So like we really hammered it to the point where, I mean, the legless rope climbs definitely don't scare me in any sense, because we've done them so much and I've had so much exposure to them now that even though I'm still not going to be the best legless rope climber, like maybe one day, probably not, but maybe, like I know how to manage them. And like the more you get exposure to it, the more you just realize, like, in different workout settings, in unfatigued settings, in fatigued settings, like we've kind of toyed with them in so many ways that, like, the goal is to expose me to them in as many ways as possible so that whatever situation comes up, I have something relatable that I can be like, okay, this is kind of like that workout we did XYZ months ago. This is how I approached it. This was the amount of rest time I was taking between. This is how often I was chalking. Like, just kind of like, having all those little data points and touch points. So it's like, all right, I know roughly what I should be doing. And then again, it just comes down to execution. So I mean, I would say they definitely don't, like, they don't make me nervous or hesitant at all. There's a piece of me that definitely hopes we see them, because again, it's like the only way you can know if you got better is if you do the thing.
Mm.
It's like if they don't program legless rope climbs at the games, I'm not going to know if I got better.
Yeah.
So part of me, there's a big piece of me that wants the challenge, and hopefully, even if it doesn't go well, like as long as it goes, for
Better.
me better, and I feel like, yeah, like, I feel like I execute it better, and like, at the end of the day, that's all competition comes down to, is like, if you execute events to the best of your ability, there's nothing else to be upset about. Like,
Mm.
that's it.
I mean,
Like, if you execute the event as best you can based on your training,
yeah.
that's all you can do.
I mean, there must be a little bit of relief knowing that there won't be cuts, or not that we know of, going into the games this year. I mean, there's only 40 athletes. How much can you cut?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like, and that's a big relief, just in the sense that, like, and maybe this is like, I mean, not purism, like, kind of like a lot of games athletes that have been at the games, and, from 12, 13 up until 2018, there was this sense of like, there's 40 people there for the weekend, and you're all going through this same grueling test. And like part of the test that is the CrossFit Games is your ability to survive the entire weekend. Like, to make it to Sunday and to still be performing, to face the test head on, to deal with the soreness, to deal with the unknowns, like all those things, like that's part of, I think to a lot of athletes, that's part of what made the CrossFit Games the CrossFit Games. So like, when that was taken away and there was cuts, and you didn't get to participate in the entire test, and there wasn't this shared experience of going through the whole weekend together, like, I think it just felt kind of hollow to a lot of the guys. Like, and again, I'm speaking guys because I know way more guys than females, at that level. I think there was like just this sense of like, just kind of that it felt incomplete.
Mm.
Whereas this year it's like, okay, like, again, I think Dave Castro has gone on record to say there won't be cuts this year. I think I remember hearing him say that in a podcast, maybe. But either way, it's like, yeah, fingers crossed, but it's just like, all right, well, then here's this sense of normalcy where it's like, I'm going to compete for 4 days through a physically and mentally grueling test with the other best athletes in the world. We're going to come out the other side, and we're going to know exactly how we stack up, because we all took the same test. we all did all the same events, like, and there's definitely a sense of relief from there, because again, that's what I think a lot of us feel like is what the CrossFit Games were all about and kind of have been about from the start. So I think there's definitely relief in that sense, because relief would definitely be a good word for that.
I mean, it's quite a tough few weeks leading up to the games now. Your training wise, obviously, it's going to be intense. And do you do game simulation weekends?
So this year is a little different because of how short the turnaround is. Like in years past, regionals were a little sooner.
Yeah.
And obviously sanctionals, like if you qualify out of the open, you have like 7 months to train for the game. So you could do cycle after cycle of whatever whatever you thought would prepare you best. Whereas this year, like usually in years past when it was regionals, I want to say we would have anywhere from like 8 to 9 weeks to prepare for the games. So in that format, we would usually do a mini camp right in the middle. So we would do like a 3 to 4 week prep phase, and then we would do a weekend where we would kind of simulate the games, not quite as aggressively, but like, within reason. My coaches would come up, a couple training partners would come up, and we'd make a big thing out of it. Whereas this year it's a little different because like, I competed the second weekend. After taking a couple days off, I only had 6 weeks to prepare, so there's not really a lot of time to do a huge up, down, up. Like you basically kind of have to prepare for 6 weeks in one direction. So there's no time for like mini tapers and things like that. So so all that being said, so one of my sponsors is hosting a games camp for our athletes out in Colorado in a week and a half, in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So I'm going to go out there, and like, it's not going to be a full game simulation, but it'll be a camp where I'm competing with other Sean Sweeney will be out there, Brandon Luckett will be out there, Cody Anderson. So there'll be some other guys that are competing at the games this year. And like, we're going to throw down obviously in full competition intensity and format. But we're not doing it with the intent to destroy ourselves as if it was the games, just because again, there's just not really like the games takes, physically and mentally takes everything from you. So there's not really enough time to kind of do that and then be in peak shape for the games 2 weeks later. So yeah, this year's a little different, which I don't mind it, because not to sound like a wimp, but games training is really hard. So like having a more condensed period where it's like, all right, you're during semifinals prep, we were doing a little bit of game style stuff. Like we were getting in the water. We were doing things that were kind of preparing under the assumption that I would be able to get through, but not putting all of our eggs in that basket. Obviously, we were still training to peak for the semi. So we started to do some exposure earlier on, like doing a lot of odd object stuff, working on, yokes, sandbags, a lot of the weird elements you see at the games. But yeah, and then we're basically into just a quick or a full on 6 week ramp up to the games at this point.